silence. That is the first thing Mark noticed when he opened the front door. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping house, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a crime scene. 2 hours. That was all it took. He had made a simple mistake, leaving his smartphone on the kitchen counter before rushing out to a business dinner. He thought he was just disconnected from the internet. He didn't realize he was being disconnected from his entire life. By the time he unlocked his phone, he had 6 missed calls, 1 voiceless message, and a wife who had vanished into thin air. But the texts found on his device? They didn't prove he was innocent. They proved he was a monster. This is the story of the Sterling disappearance. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things away. It just makes the grime slicker. That was Mark Sterling's thought as he fumbled with the keys to his charcoal grey Mercedes E-Class. It was 6:45 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. The sky was already a bruised purple, leaking freezing drizzle onto the driveway of his suburban home in Bellevue. Mark was late. He was always late these days. As a senior architect for Vanguard Developments, the pressure of the new downtown high-rise project was crushing him. He threw his leather satchel into the passenger seat, cranked the engine, and backed out of the driveway, his mind already rehearsing his pitch to the investors he was meeting at the Capitol Grill. He was 3 miles down the interstate, merging into the aggressive flow of I-405, when he reached into his pocket to check the traffic updates. Nothing. Just lint and the lining of his suit pants. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He checked the cup holder. Empty. He checked the passenger seat. Just the bag. He glanced at the dashboard. No glowing screen. Damn it. He had left his iPhone 15 Pro Max on the marble island in the kitchen. He could picture it perfectly, sitting right next to the bowl of lemons Damien had bought yesterday, face up, charging cable snaking away from it. Mark slammed his hand against the steering wheel. He debated turning around. Damien would be home. She was in the living room reading when he left. She had barely looked up, just a murmured, "Drive safe," as he rushed out. If he went back now, he'd be 30 minutes late to the dinner. Greg, his managing partner, would be furious. The investors would walk. This deal was worth $4 million in commission alone. Forget it, Mark muttered to the empty car, his knuckles white on the wheel. It's 2 hours. I can survive 2 hours without a phone. It felt like phantom limb syndrome. Every time the car idled at a light, his hand twitched toward the empty space in the center console. He felt naked, exposed. But more than that, he felt a strange sense of foreboding. He tried to shake it off. It was just phone addiction, he told himself. Nothing more. He arrived at the restaurant at 7:10 p.m., 10 minutes late. Greg was already at the booth, nursing a scotch, looking annoyed. The investors, 2 men in bespoke suits named Arthur and David, were polite but chilly. "Technical difficulties?" Greg asked, eyeing Mark's flustered state. "Left the phone at home," Mark said, forcing a laugh as he slid into the booth. "Forced digital detox. My wife, Damien, is probably happy she doesn't have to hear it buzzing all night." The dinner went smoothly, but the anxiety never left Mark's gut. Without the clock on his phone, he found himself constantly checking his wristwatch. 7:45 p.m., 8:15 p.m., 8:40 p.m. He felt untethered. Usually he would have texted Damien by now. "Dinner going well. Order me a pizza," or "Love you. Be home soon." Instead, there was just silence. At 8:55 p.m., the check was paid. Hands were shaken. The deal was tentatively agreed upon. Mark exhaled, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. He walked Greg to the valet stand. "You look pale, Mark," Greg said, lighting a cigarette under the awning. "Everything okay at home?" "Yeah, fine, just tired. Damien's been distant lately. Probably just the winter blues. Go home. Hug your wife. Get some sleep. Mark nodded and got into his car. The drive back was faster. The rain had stopped, leaving the roads glistening black. As he pulled into his neighborhood, the quiet suburbia felt comforting. He turned onto Elm Street, then his driveway. The house was dark. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Damien never went to bed before 11 p.m. She was a night owl, usually up watching true crime documentaries or painting in the sunroom. But the windows were black voids. The porch light, which was on a timer, was the only illumination. Mark parked and grabbed his bag. He unlocked the front door. "Damien?" he called out. His voice echoed in the hallway. No answer. He flipped the light switch. The entryway was pristine. He walked into the kitchen. His phone was exactly where he had pictured it, on the marble island next to the lemons. It looked innocuous, a black slab of glass reflecting the recessed lighting. But something else was on the counter. A wine glass. Shattered. Red wine had spilled across the white marble, dripping onto the floor like a slow, jagged wound. It had dried, sticky and dark. "Damien!" Mark yelled, panic seizing his throat. He ran to the living room. Empty. The TV was off. He sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. "Damien!" He burst into the master bedroom. The bed was made, perfectly smooth. Her vanity was clear. He ran to the closet. He ripped the doors open. Damien's clothes were there, her coats, her dresses. But as his eyes scanned the floor, he stopped. Her favorite pair of boots, the brown leather ones she wore everywhere, were gone. And the small, carry-on suitcase, usually stored on the top shelf, gone. Mark stood in the center of the bedroom, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. She left? Barely 2 hours ago she was reading a book. He ran back downstairs to the kitchen. He grabbed his phone. He needed to call her. Maybe she went to her sister's. Maybe they had a fight he didn't remember. He tapped the screen to wake it up. Face ID locked. He swiped up and entered his passcode. The phone unlocked. His notifications were flooded. 14. Missed calls from wife. 3 missed calls from unknown number. 1 voicemail, and then he saw the text messages. He opened the message thread with Damien. His blood ran cold. There were messages sent from his phone to Damien. Today, 7:42 p.m. Mark, I know you found the account. Don't bother running. Today, 7:45 p.m. Damien. Mark, what are you talking about? I'm in the kitchen. Where are you? Today, 7:46 p.m. Mark, I'm watching you. If you leave the house, I'll kill you. Today, 7:50 p.m. Damien. Please, you're scaring me. I'm leaving. Mark stared at the screen, his hands trembling so violently he almost dropped the device. I didn't send these, he whispered to the empty room. I was at dinner. I didn't have my phone. He looked at the time stamp. 7:42 p.m. At 7:42 p.m., he was eating a ribeye steak at the Capitol Grill, surrounded by 3 witnesses. His phone was here, on this counter. Someone had been in the house. Someone had used his phone. And now, his wife was gone. Mark didn't call the police immediately. He did what any confused, terrified husband would do. He called Damien. It went straight to voicemail. Hi, this is Damien. Leave a message. Damien. Pick up. I don't know what's going on. I just got home. I didn't send those texts. Where are you? Call me back immediately. He hung up and dialed her sister Chloe. Hello? Chloe sounded groggy. It was nearly 10:15 p.m. Chloe, is Damien with you? Mark. No. Why would she be? Is everything okay? She's not here. Her suitcase is gone. There's wine on the floor. Did you guys fight? No. I went to dinner, came back, and she's gone. Chloe, there are texts on my phone, threats I didn't send. There was a pause on the other end. Call the police, Mark. Now. 10:45 p.m. Blue and red lights strobed against the tasteful beige siding of the Sterling residence. 2 patrol cars and an unmarked detective's sedan blocked the driveway. Detective Harrison Miller was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite and left out in the rain too long. He was in his 50s, wearing a cheap trench coat that smelled of stale coffee. He stood in the kitchen, looking at the spilled wine. "So," Miller said, turning to Mark. Mark was sitting at the dining table, his head in his hands. "Run it by me again. You left at 6:45 p.m. "Yes," Mark said, his voice hoarse. "I left my phone here, on the island." "And you went to the Capitol Grill in Seattle?" "Yes. I met Greg Alston, Arthur Vance, and David Moore. We were there until almost 9 p.m. Miller nodded, jotting notes in a small spiral notebook. "And you say you didn't send these texts?" "How could I?" Mark pleaded, standing up. "I didn't have the phone. You can check the restaurant's security cameras. You can ask the waiter. I was there." Miller walked over to the counter where the phone lay, now bagged in an evidence lock bag. "Mr. Sterling, do you have a passcode on this device?" "Yes. A 6-digit PIN. Who else knows it?" "Just me." "Maybe Damien." "Anyone else? An assistant? A girlfriend?" Miller's eyes were sharp, probing. "No, there is no girlfriend. I love my wife." Miller signaled to a uniformed officer to begin photographing the scene. "Here's the problem, Mark. These texts were sent at 7:42 p.m. The phone was unlocked manually. If you were at dinner, then someone else unlocked your phone. Who has your face or your thumbprint?" "Face ID," Mark said. "It uses Face ID." "So," Miller said, leaning in close, "either someone who looks exactly like you unlocked this phone, or you came back, sent the texts, killed your wife, disposed of the body, and went back to dinner." "I was at the dinner the whole time," Mark shouted. "We'll verify that," Miller said calmly. "But right now, this looks like a domestic dispute turned violent. We have threats of death sent from your device. We have signs of a struggle, the wine. We have a missing woman." "Check the house," Mark insisted. "Check the cameras. We checked your Ring doorbell," Miller said. He pulled out a tablet. "Take a look." He played the footage. 6:45 p.m. Mark leaves the house. 9:15 p.m. Mark returns. "See?" Mark said, relief washing over him. "No one came in or out." "Keep watching," Miller said. Mark watched. The timestamp ticked by. The driveway remained empty. The rain fell. "There," Miller pointed. 7:30 p.m. The camera glitched. The video froze, pixelated, and went black for 10 seconds. When it came back on at 7:10 p.m., the driveway was still empty. "A glitch?" Mark asked. "Or a jammer," Miller said grimly. "Someone disabled your camera for 10 seconds, long enough to slip in the side door if they knew the layout, or long enough for you to sneak back in." "I didn't sneak back in." "Then explain this." Miller swiped on the tablet to a different image. It was a still frame from a traffic cam on the I-405, taken at 7:15 p.m. It showed Mark's grey Mercedes. But Mark wasn't driving. The driver was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, face obscured by a baseball cap. But on the wrist, resting clearly on the steering wheel, was a distinctive watch, a gold Rolex Daytona with a green dial. Miller looked at Mark's wrist. Mark was wearing that exact watch. I wasn't wearing it," Mark stammered, looking at his wrist in horror. "I left it on the dresser. I wore my Apple Watch to dinner. Wait, no, I didn't have my phone, so I didn't wear the Apple Watch. He looked down. He was wearing the Rolex. When had he put it on? He couldn't remember. The panic was making his memory foggy. "Mr. Sterling," Detective Miller said, his voice dropping an octave, losing all warmth. "I think you should call a lawyer. You're not under arrest yet. but I'm taking you downtown for questioning, and we are declaring this a crime scene." As Mark was escorted out of his own home, past the neighbors gathering on the sidewalk under umbrellas, he looked back at the house. The dark window of the master bedroom seemed to stare back at him. He realized then that the text message from his phone, "I know you found the account," wasn't just a threat. It was a clue. Damien had found something, or someone had planted something. And Mark Sterling, the man who built skyscrapers, was being framed with a precision that was terrifyingly architectural. The interrogation room at the Bellevue Police Precinct was designed to make you feel small. It was a 6x8 box with cinder block walls, painted a suffocating shade of beige. The table was bolted to the floor. The air conditioning was cranked up high enough to make Mark shiver in his suit jacket. It had been 4 hours. Detective Miller walked back in, holding a styrofoam cup of coffee. He didn't offer one to Mark. He sat down heavily, the metal chair screeching against the linoleum. "We found the account, Mark," Miller said, his voice deceptively soft. Mark looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "What account?" "I told you. I don't know what those texts meant." Miller slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout from a bank statement. Cayman National Bank. "Account number ending in 8842, Miller read. "Opened 6 months ago. In your name. Yesterday morning a wire transfer of $500,000 hit the balance. The source? A shell company linked to Vanguard Development Suppliers." Mark stared at the paper. "This isn't mine. I don't have offshore accounts. I'm an architect, for God's sake, not a cartel leader." "It looks like embezzlement, Mark," Miller said, leaning forward. "Here's the theory. You've been skimming off the top of the high-rise project, taking kickbacks from contractors. Damien, your wife, who used to work as a bookkeeper, didn't she? Found out? She confronted you. She threatened to expose you. You realized you were about to lose your career, your reputation, everything." "That is a lie." Mark slammed his hand on the table. "Damien hasn't worked in finance in 10 years. She paints." "Does she?" Miller raised an eyebrow. "Because we just ran a background check on your wife. Did you know she was consulting for a forensic accounting firm in downtown Seattle, under her maiden name, Damien Rousseau, for the last 6 months?" The room seemed to tilt. Mark sat back, his mouth slightly open. "No, that's impossible. She's at home during the day. She was building a case, Mark," Miller said ruthlessly. "Against you, and tonight you decided to close the case." "I was at dinner," Mark shouted. "Ask Greg. Ask the investors." "We did," Miller nodded. "Greg confirms you were there. But here's the interesting part. The waiter? A kid named Jason? He says around 7:35 p.m. you excused yourself to go to the restroom. You were gone for nearly 25 minutes. He thought you were sick." Mark's mind raced. He had gone to the restroom, but only for 5 minutes. He washed his hands, splashed water on his face to wake up, and went back. 5 minutes, not 25. Time is subjective when you're drunk on adrenaline, Mark. 25 minutes is enough time to slip out the back, meet an accomplice, or maybe drive home if you drive fast enough. But we know you didn't drive home. The traffic cam shows your car was already on the road. This makes no sense. Mark felt like he was drowning in a sea of fabricated evidence. If my car was on the road at 7:15 and I was at the restaurant until 7:35, then I wasn't driving the car. You're proving my innocence, Miller smiled, a cold, predatory grimace. Or, you hired someone. You handed off your car keys and your Rolex to a fixer. They went to the house to silence Damien, using your phone to stage the texts, while you established an alibi at the steakhouse. It's the strangers on a train scenario, but sloppy. You forgot the camera jammer would leave a digital footprint. You forgot the traffic cam. "I want a lawyer," Mark said, his voice trembling. "Smartest thing you've said all night." 30 minutes later, Sarah Jenkins walked in. She was Mark's corporate attorney, a woman who wore sharpness like a weapon. She had short blonde hair and a suit that cost more than Miller's car. "Detective," she said, not sitting down. "Unless you have a body or DNA evidence linking my client to a violent act, you are holding him on speculation. The car photo is inconclusive. The driver's face is covered. The text messages are circumstantial and could be spoofed or sent by an intruder. The bank account could be identity theft. My client is leaving." Miller chewed on the inside of his cheek. He knew she was right. He had a pile of coincidences, but no smoking gun. "He doesn't leave town," Miller warned. "Passports surrendered." "Done," Sarah said. She grabbed Mark's arm. "Let's go." As they walked out of the precinct into the cold night air, Mark felt like a ghost. "Sarah," he whispered, "I didn't do it, but someone is trying very hard to make it look like I did." "I know," Sarah said, unlocking her BMW. "But Mark, you need to be honest with me. The forensic accounting thing. Did you really not know Damien was working again?" "I swear, I thought she was painting watercolors." Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Then you didn't know your wife at all, and that is going to be a problem." Mark returned to the house at 3 a.m. Sarah had advised him to stay at a hotel, but he refused. He needed to be close to where it happened. He needed to find something the police had missed. The police seal was on the front door, but as the homeowner, he was allowed entry, since he hadn't been charged. The house smelled of fingerprint powder and that metallic scent of dried wine. He walked into the kitchen. The lemons were still there. The shattered glass was gone, swept up by evidence techs, but the stain remained on the marble. He went upstairs to the master bedroom. It had been tossed. The police had gone through the drawers, the closet, everything. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. The silence was deafening. Damien. He thought about what Miller had said. Forensic accountant. Damien Rousseau. Why would she lie? They had been married for 5 years. They were happy. Or so he thought. He stood up and walked to her vanity. It was an antique piece, French from the 1920s. He had bought it for her as an anniversary gift 3 years ago. She loved it because of the intricate carving. He remembered something she had shown him when it first arrived. "Look, Mark, a secret drawer. For love letters?" He knelt down. Underneath the main drawer, there was a small latch hidden in the floral carving. The police, looking for obvious weapons or files, might have missed it if they didn't know antiques. He pressed the latch. A thin, shallow drawer clicked open. It wasn't empty. Inside, there was no jewelry, no love letters. There was a black USB drive and a small, leather-bound notebook. Mark's heart hammered. He grabbed the notebook. He recognized Damien's handwriting immediately. Looping, elegant script. But the content was jagged and rushed. October 4th. Confirmed. The discrepancy in the concrete supply costs is artificial. Someone is padding the invoices by 20%. October 12th. Traced the shell company, Apex Materials. It leads back to an IP address in Seattle. It leads back to Vanguard. October 20th. I found the emails. They are archiving them on a private server. Mark is CC'd on everything. How could he? November 1st. I confronted him about the stress. He lied. He said it was just deadlines. He looked me in the eye and lied. He's one of them. Mark dropped the notebook on the floor. She thought I was stealing, he whispered. She thought I was the one embezzling. He picked up the notebook again. The last entry was dated yesterday morning. November 14th. I have the proof. The USB has the raw server logs. I'm taking it to the FBI tomorrow. I can't live with a thief. I'm sorry, Mark. Mark felt a wave of nausea. Damien wasn't investigating him specifically. She was investigating the corruption at Vanguard, and someone had framed him to make it look like he was the mastermind. The emails she found, the ones he was CC'd on, he had never seen them. They must have been hidden, or his email was compromised. He looked at the USB drive. This was the proof. If the police found this, they would think it was Mark's insurance policy, or proof of his guilt. But if the killer knew Damien had this, Mark froze. The house was silent. Too silent. He heard a floorboard creak. It came from the hallway. Mark stood up slowly, clutching the USB drive in his fist. He hadn't turned the alarm on when he came in. He was too distracted. Another creak. Closer. Mark looked around for a weapon. A heavy brass lamp stood on the bedside table. He grabbed it, ripping the cord from the wall. The bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, was pushed open. A figure stood there, dressed in black, wearing a ski mask. Mark didn't hesitate. He lunged. The intruder was fast, but Mark was desperate. He swung the lamp with a feral scream. The brass base connected with the intruder's shoulder. The man grunted, stumbling back. The intruder pulled a knife, a long, serrated hunting blade. "Give me the drive," the man rasped. His voice was distorted, muffled. "Where is she?" Mark screamed, swinging the lamp again. "Where is my wife?" The intruder dodged, slashing the knife through the air. The blade caught Mark's forearm, slicing through his dress shirt and skin. Blood sprayed. Mark roared in pain but didn't stop. He tackled the man, slamming him into the hallway wall. They crashed to the floor, a tangle of limbs and fury. Mark punched the mask, feeling bone beneath the fabric. The intruder head-butted Mark, a stunning blow to the nose. Mark fell back, vision blurring. The man scrambled up. He looked at Mark, then at the open vanity drawer. He realized the drive wasn't there. It was in Mark's pocket. Sirens wailed in the distance. A neighbor must have reported the noise or seen the struggle through the window. The intruder cursed. He turned and sprinted for the stairs. Mark tried to get up, but the room spun. "Come back," he choked out. He dragged himself to the window. He saw the figure run across the lawn, vault the back fence, and disappear into the dark woods that bordered the property. Mark collapsed against the wall, clutching his bleeding arm. He pulled the USB drive out of his pocket. It was slippery with his own blood. He wasn't just a suspect anymore. He was a target. And Damien? If the killer was here looking for the drive, it meant Damien hadn't given it up. It meant she might still be alive. Mark didn't go back to the hospital. He wrapped his arm in a towel and duct tape, a crude field dressing, and drove. He couldn't trust the police. Miller thought he was guilty. If he handed over the USB drive, Miller might bury it, or worse, the evidence might disappear if the police were compromised too. He needed help. He needed someone who understood the digital world better than he did. He drove to the University District. He parked in an alleyway behind a run-down apartment complex that smelled of weed and stale beer. He banged on door 4B. "Go away," a voice muffled from inside. "Leo, it's Mark Sterling. Open the door." Leo was Mark's younger cousin, a college dropout, a hacktivist, and a genius who lived off energy drinks and conspiracy theories. The door opened. Leo stood there in boxer shorts and a hoodie, looking bleary-eyed. "Mark, it's 4 a.m. and... Dude, you're bleeding. Let me in." Inside, Leo's apartment was a cave of monitors. Servers hummed in the corner. "I saw the news," Leo said, clearing pizza boxes off a chair. "They say you offed Damien. Did you? No, Mark said, dropping onto the chair. He tossed the bloody USB drive onto Leo's desk. She found something. Corruption at my firm. Someone framed me, Leo. They spoofed my phone. They planted money in an offshore account. And tonight, someone tried to kill me for that drive. Leo's eyes widened. He picked up the drive with a tissue. Okay. This is getting movie-level intense. What do you need? I need to know who the unknown number was that called me. I need to know where my phone really was when those texts were sent. And I need to know what's on that drive. Leo cracked his knuckles. The drive is encrypted. AES 256, standard for corporate espionage. Give me an hour. And the phone data? If they used a spoofer, it's hard. But, Leo grinned, typing furiously. If your phone is an iPhone 15, it has the ultra-wideband chip. Even if it's off or disconnected from the network, it pings other Apple devices in the Find My network. It creates a ghost trail. Mark watched the screens. Code cascaded like green rain. Got into your iCloud, Leo muttered. Okay, let's look at the metadata for the text messages sent to Damien. Leo paused. He frowned. What? Mark asked, leaning in. The texts sent at 7:42 p.m. I know you found the account. They weren't typed. What do you mean? They were copy-pasted, Leo said. The input speed was 0 milliseconds for the whole sentence. Someone had a script. They plugged your phone into a laptop and executed a command. Can you trace the laptop? No, but look at this. Leo pointed to a map on the screen. This is the location data from your Apple Watch. You said you weren't wearing it? I don't remember. I thought I left it. Well, the watch was active. At 7:15 p.m., it recorded a heart rate of 140 beats per minute. That's panic attack level. Or running. Where was it? It wasn't at the restaurant, Leo said, zooming in on the map. And it wasn't at your house. The red dot on the map hovered over a location in the industrial district, near the docks. It was at a warehouse, Vanguard Storage Facility B. Mark stared at the map. I've been there. That's where we keep the architectural models and overflow materials. Why would your watch be there? Leo asked. Because the person pretending to be me went there, Mark realized. The person in the Mercedes. They drove to the warehouse. Why? Wait, Leo interrupted. The drive is open. He clicked a file. A spreadsheet opened. Mark scanned the columns. It was a list of payments, millions of dollars, siphoned from the high-rise project into accounts held by. Mark stopped. He saw a name. Greg Alston, his partner, his friend, the man he had dinner with. Greg, Mark whispered. He's stealing from the company. He's the one padding the invoices. And look who authorized the payments, Leo pointed. Under the column Authorization Signature, it wasn't Greg's name. It was Mark Sterling. He forged my signature, Mark said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He's been setting me up for months. If the project goes bust, or the auditors come, I take the fall. And Damien found out, Leo added. She must have confronted him, Mark said, standing up. Or he found out she knew. Mark, Leo said, his voice shaking. Look at the last file on the drive. It's an audio file, recorded yesterday at 4:40 p.m. Mark clicked play. Static. Then voices. Damien. I know it's you, Greg. I have the logs. Greg. Damien, be reasonable. Mark is involved too. If you sink me, you sink him. Damien. Liar. Mark doesn't know. I'm going to the police. Greg. I can't let you do that. A scuffle. The sound of a phone dropping. Then silence. He has her, Mark said, his voice cold, devoid of fear now, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He didn't kill her at the house. There wasn't enough blood. The wine was staged. He took her. Where? Leo asked. Mark looked back at the map. The red dot of the Apple Watch at the warehouse. The watch was at the warehouse at 7:15 p.m., Mark said. Greg was at dinner with me at 7:10 p.m. He couldn't be in two places at once. Unless, Leo said, Greg isn't the one who drove your car. He hired someone, Mark said. But he's keeping her at the warehouse. It's the only place he controls completely. Mark grabbed his keys. Where are you going? Leo asked. To get my wife. Mark, you're injured. You're unarmed. Call Miller. Miller will take an hour to get a warrant. By then, Greg will know I have the drive. He'll kill her. Mark turned to the door. Send that audio file to Miller, but wait 20 minutes. Give me a head start. Mark, this is suicide. No, Mark said, his eyes hard. It's a site inspection. The Vanguard Storage Facility B, located in the desolate industrial throat of Seattle's Port District, was a mausoleum of abandoned ambitions. It was a sprawling, corrugated steel structure where the company stored surplus materials, heavy machinery, and the large-scale architectural models of buildings that were never built. Mark killed the headlights of his rental car a block away. The rain had returned with a vengeance, hammering the roof like handfuls of gravel. His arm throbbed with a dull, sickening rhythm, the duct tape binding, soaking through with fresh blood. He popped 2 ibuprofen dry, a futile gesture against the pain, and stepped out into the deluge. He knew this building. He had designed the renovation for it 3 years ago. He knew that the main loading bay doors were alarmed, and the front entrance was monitored by cameras that fed directly to the security firm Greg had hired, a firm Greg controlled. But Mark also knew about the drainage retrofit on the north side. There was a maintenance hatch behind the generator unit that led into the sub-basement ventilation system. It wasn't on the official blueprints. Mark had left it accessible for the HVAC crews during the summer overhauls. He squeezed behind the humming generator, the smell of diesel fumes choking him. He found the hatch, rusted but unsecured. With a grunt of effort that sent white-hot lances of pain up his arm, he pried it open and dropped into the darkness. He crawled through the crawl space, the metal cold against his knees. He emerged into the main warehouse floor, behind a towering stack of plywood pallets. The space was cavernous, lit only by high-intensity floodlights hanging from the rafters, casting long, skeletal shadows. The sound of the rain on the metal roof was deafening, a constant roar that masked his footsteps. In the center of the vast concrete floor, Mark saw it, his charcoal-gray Mercedes. It was parked next to a black SUV. The hood of the Mercedes was cold, but the SUV's engine was ticking, cooling down, and there were voices. Mark moved closer, weaving through the aisles of industrial shelving. He hid behind a massive 10-foot-tall scale model of a stadium Vanguard had pitched in 2022. He peered through the miniature seating rows. 3 men stood in the clearing. One was the intruder from the house, Silas. Mark recognized the build, the way he held himself like a coiled spring. He wasn't wearing a mask now. He had a brutal, scarred face and a shaved head. The second man was a stranger, holding a tablet. The third man was Greg Alston. Greg looked out of place in his tailored Italian suit, the hem of his trousers wet from the puddle he was standing near. He looked frantic, pacing back and forth, running a hand through his silver hair. "You said it was clean, Silas." Greg's voice carried over the rain, shrill with panic. "You said he didn't see you." "He saw me," Silas grunted, his voice like gravel. "He fought back. The architect has teeth, but I got out. He doesn't know who I am." "He has the drive," Greg screamed, kicking the tire of the Mercedes. "Do you understand what is on that drive? My life! My freedom!" "He doesn't have the password," Silas said calmly, "and he's bleeding. He won't go to the cops, not yet. He thinks they're looking for him." "We need to finish this tonight," Greg hissed. "Where is she?" Silas jerked his thumb toward a small, prefabricated office module in the corner of the warehouse. "Inside, she's quiet." Mark's heart stopped. "She's alive." He scanned the area. He needed a weapon. He needed a distraction. He was an architect. He solved structural problems. This was just a problem of leverage and force. He looked up. Directly above the group of men, suspended by heavy chains from the gantry crane, was a pallet of steel I-beams. The chain hoist control box hung from a cable near a support pillar, 10 feet to Mark's left. If he could reach that control box, he could drop the load. Not on them, he wasn't a murderer, but near them. Enough to create chaos. Mark took a breath. He moved. He made it to the pillar. He reached for the yellow control box. "Hey!" The shout came from the man with the tablet. He had turned, spotting Mark in the shadows. "It's him!" the man yelled. Silas spun around, drawing a gun from his waistband, a suppressed pistol. Mark didn't hesitate. He slammed his fist onto the down button on the hoist control. Above them, the chain motor whirred to life. The pallet of steel beams groaned and descended rapidly. But it was too slow. Silas fired. Pfft! A bullet sparked off the concrete pillar, inches from Mark's face. Concrete dust blinded him. Mark abandoned the control and ran. He sprinted into the maze of shelving units. "Kill him!" Greg screamed. "Don't let him leave!" Mark ran down aisle 4, his breath tearing at his throat. He heard heavy boots pounding behind him. Silas was fast. Mark turned a corner and collided with a stack of PVC piping. He scrambled over it. He needed to get to the office module. He needed to get to Damien. He saw the office ahead, a glass-walled box in the middle of the floor. He could see a figure tied to a chair inside. He broke into a sprint across the open floor. Puffed! Puffed! 2 more shots. One tugged at his jacket sleeve. Mark dove, sliding across the slick concrete, crashing into the door of the office module. He scrambled up and burst inside. Damien was there. Her eyes were wide with terror, duct tape over her mouth, her hands zip-tied behind the chair. She had a bruise on her cheek. "Mark!" She tried to scream against the tape. He ripped the tape off her mouth. "I've got you! I've got you! Behind you!" she screamed. Mark spun around. Silas was in the doorway. He didn't raise the gun. He smiled, holstering it. He pulled a knife, the same serrated blade from the bedroom. "No more noise," Silas whispered. "Boss wants it quiet." Mark backed up, putting himself between Silas and Damien. He was cornered. He was injured. He was an office worker facing a killer, but his hand brushed against something on the desk behind him. A heavy metal staple gun. A contractor-grade pneumatic stapler that had been left there during the retrofit. Silas lunged. Mark didn't swing. He raised the stapler and pulled the trigger. Thwack! A heavy-duty industrial staple fired into Silas's neck. Silas gasped, his hand flying to his throat. He stumbled back, shock registering in his eyes. Mark didn't stop. He kicked Silas in the knee, hearing a satisfying crunch. Silas went down. Mark brought the heavy base of the stapler down on the man's wrist, knocking the knife away. "Get up!" Mark yelled to Damien. He grabbed a pair of scissors from the desk and slashed her zip ties. Damien was free. She threw her arms around him, sobbing. "You came back." "Always," Mark rasped. "Touching," a voice said from the doorway. Greg stood there. He was holding the gun Silas had dropped. His hand was shaking, but at this range he couldn't miss. "Greg," Mark said, stepping in front of Damien. "It's over. The police have the file. My cousin sent it 10 minutes ago." "You're lying," Greg sneered. "You always were a terrible liar, Mark. That's why I needed you. The honest face of Vanguard. The perfect patsy." "Why?" Mark asked, stalling. He could hear sirens, faint, distant wails rising above the rain. "Why?" Greg laughed, a manic, broken sound. "Because I have debts, Mark. Real debts. Gambling debts. The kind of people I owe don't send collection agencies. They send people like Silas. I needed $5 million to clear the books. You were just collateral damage." "You framed your best friend," Mark said, edging slightly to the right. "I saved myself," Greg shouted, raising the gun. "And now I'm going to finish it. Murder-suicide, Mark. Tragic. The embezzling husband kills his wife and then himself. I'll make it look perfect." The sirens were louder now, screeching into the parking lot outside. "They're here, Greg," Mark said softly. "Put it down." Greg's eyes darted to the warehouse entrance. The distraction was minuscule, but it was enough. Damien moved. She grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from the desk and hurled it. It struck Greg in the forehead. He staggered back, the gun firing into the ceiling. Mark tackled him. They crashed out of the office onto the concrete floor. Greg was weaker than Silas, but he was fighting with the desperation of a drowning man. He clawed at Mark's injured arm. Mark screamed in pain, but didn't let go. He pinned Greg down, punching him once, twice in the jaw. "Stay down!" Mark roared. Blue and red lights flooded the warehouse, cutting through the shadows. The main doors rolled open with a screech of metal. "Police! Drop it! Get on the ground!" Detective Miller's voice boomed over a megaphone. Mark slumped, rolling off Greg. He lay on his back on the cold concrete, looking up at the high vaulted ceiling. He felt Damien's hand grip his. "We're okay," she whispered, her tears mixing with the rain that dripped from a leak in the roof. "We're okay." The interrogation room was different this time. The door was open. There was coffee on the table, the good kind from a nearby cafe, not the precinct sludge. Mark sat with his arm in a proper sling, stitched and bandaged. Damien sat beside him, holding his good hand with a grip that hadn't loosened in 6 hours. Detective Miller sat opposite them. He looked exhausted, but the hostility was gone. In its place was a weary respect. "We have everything," Miller said, flipping through a thick file. "Leo, your cousin, is a genius, by the way. He decrypted Greg's personal laptop remotely, before we even got a warrant. It's all there." "The texts?" Mark asked. "How did he do it?" Miller pulled out a diagram. "It was the unknown number that called you 3 times. It wasn't a call. It was a payload delivery. Greg had installed spyware on your phone weeks ago, probably when you left it on your desk at work. The call triggered a script that allowed a remote device to mirror your phone's ID. Silas, the man in the warehouse, had a laptop in the van outside your house. He sent the texts through your phone's Bluetooth connection while you were at dinner." "And the alibi?" Damien asked. Her voice was raspy. "That was the most audacious part," Miller said, shaking his head. "Greg is a sociopath. He bought the exact same suit as Mark. He stole your spare car key from your gym locker. He hired a driver to take your car to the highway to trigger the cameras. Meanwhile, Greg stayed at the restaurant, but he drugged your drink, Mark." Mark blinked. "Drugged me?" "A mild sedative, just enough to make you foggy, to make you lose track of time in the bathroom. The waiter said you were gone for 25 minutes. You weren't. You were gone for 10. But Greg paid the waiter, a kid with a drug record, $5,000 to lie about the timeline. We found the cash in the waiter's locker. So the 25 minutes was a lie, Mark realized. The gap never existed. "Exactly," Miller said. "There was no gap. Greg never left the restaurant. He didn't need to. He orchestrated the whole thing from his phone at the table while you were in the bathroom splashing water on your face. He was texting Silas to take Damien." Damien shuddered. Mark squeezed her hand. "What happens to him?" Mark asked. "Greg is looking at kidnapping, attempted murder, grand larceny, and corporate fraud. He's going away for life. Silas is already singing like a bird to cut a deal. He's giving us names of people Greg owed money to. It's a mess, but it's a mess we can clean up." Miller closed the file. He leaned forward. "I owe you an apology, Mark. I saw the evidence, and I followed the path of least resistance. I almost let an innocent man go down." "You did your job," Mark said tiredly. "The evidence was designed to fool you." "Still," Miller stood up and extended his hand. "You fought for her. That's what matters. You're free to go." 2 weeks later. The house in Bellevue was sold. Neither Mark nor Damien could sleep there again. The memory of the wine on the floor, the intruder in the closet, the silence. It was too loud. They rented a small cabin on the coast, overlooking the grey, churning Pacific Ocean. It was quiet here. Real quiet. Mark stood on the deck, watching the waves crash against the rocks. He held a cup of tea. He wasn't wearing his Rolex. He wore a simple plastic digital watch. Damien came out, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She leaned against him. "Did you throw it away?" she asked. "The smartphone?" Mark nodded toward the trash bin at the side of the house. "Yeah, getting a flip phone tomorrow, only for calls." Damien laughed softly. "A digital detox?" "Permanent." Mark smiled, kissing the top of her head. He thought about that night. The mistake of leaving his phone on the counter. It had been the catalyst for the nightmare, but in a strange way, it had saved him. If he had taken his phone to dinner, Greg might have used a different plan. One where Mark disappeared too. The phone was a leash, it was a tracker, it was a weapon. And Mark Sterling was done being a target. "You know," Damien said, looking out at the horizon, "I never did send those files to the FBI." "I know," Mark said. "You were trying to protect me." "I thought you were guilty, Mark. For a moment, when I saw your signature on those documents. I hated you." Mark turned to her, tilting her chin up. "And I thought you were just painting watercolors. We both had secrets, Elle. We both stopped looking at each other." "No more secrets," she whispered. "No more secrets," he promised. He reached into his pocket. Not for a phone, but for her hand. The sun began to break through the clouds, a pale, watery light illuminating the coastline. They stood there, disconnected from the world, but finally, truly connected to each other. The nightmare was over. But the lesson would remain, etched into the architecture of their lives. In a world where everyone is watching, sometimes the only safety lies in the silence. And that is the terrifying true crime-style saga of Mark and Damien Sterling. It's a story that reminds us of a chilling reality. Our digital lives are fragile. We trust our devices with our secrets, our locations, and our identities. But as Mark found out, the trust can be weaponized. A simple mistake, leaving a phone on a counter, triggered a domino effect that almost cost 2 people their lives. It forces us to ask, how much of our evidence is real, and how much can be manufactured by someone who knows our passcodes? Greg Alston thought he could build the perfect frame job, using technology to rewrite reality. But he forgot the one variable you can't code: the human will to survive, and the instinct to protect the ones we love. This story isn't just a thriller. It's a warning. Check your permissions. Change your passcodes. And maybe, just maybe, keep your eyes on the people you love, not just the screen in your hand. If you enjoyed this twist-filled mystery, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And I want to hear from you in the comments. If you came home and your partner was missing, what is the first thing you would check? let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.